Before we go out and get into today's episode, just want to put a shout out to let all psychologists in the Canberra region or thereabouts to let everyone know we are currently hiring. So if you're interested or you know someone who might be interested, go to strategicpsychology.com.au and you'll find the careers page there. Look forward to hearing from you. Today's episode will be with NeLi Martin. She's a yoga expert. She doesn't like me using the word expert, but I think she's pretty phenomenal. Also, mindfulness teacher, dancer, and psychologist, of course. You will get so much value out of this. I personally did during our conversation. It's really amazing how she thinks about and talks about mindfulness in particular and how you can apply it in your everyday life. Enjoy.
Okay, life can be crazy. You're feeling like you're sinking, just trying to find a meaning. It's time for better thinking, yeah, better thinking. Time to tune in. Let's go.
Today on Better Thinking podcast, I'd like to welcome NeLi Martin, who's a psychologist, dance teacher and yoga teacher, expert in mindfulness, I would say, as she's been able to practice that obviously throughout her life in those roles. But I think she's got some really unique ways of exploring mindfulness, what it is, what it looks like in our day-to-day, or what it can look like in our day-to-day lives. And so it's an absolute pleasure to have and introduce NeLi to the podcast. Welcome.
Oh, thanks, Nesh. It's lovely to be here and having a conversation with you again. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, so this is actually take two because we had a technical difficulty previously, so we're doing it all again. So thank you for your, being so accommodating.
Thanks for doing it again.
So
we'll see what happens this time.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope it works out. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Obviously, there's a number of hats, a number of roles that you play, and today's topic being on mindfulness. Maybe you could just talk a little bit about your journey to start with.
Yeah, sure. So my journey, I guess, with mindfulness probably really started as I was burning out, being a young psychologist. So having worked in child protection and juvenile justice in the late 80s and early 90s, and found my way from Australia to the UK, working in therapeutic roles with kids, who'd been sexually abused, were sexually abusing other children. Quite heavy work really for someone still in their 20s, and I needed really to find a way to save myself, really, because it was just really hard work. And while I was prepared to, I think I was well prepared to do it, and I had excellent supervisors in my roles, I just felt, internally that like life was hard. It was sort of felt a little, like the lack of exuberance, I guess, that I could see was happening around me that I didn't feel connected to. And so that's where I came across yoga, first of all, when I was living in London. And, that really just blew my world, So I was a little bit of a, did some physical sport and things like that when I was younger. But the way that yoga was able to work with both, the body and the breath, I don't know, it was one of those things that I will never forget as a, introduction to my life, because it just really helped me cope with life in a way that I wasn't coping so well with before.
Can you tell me a little bit about what that moment was like? It's like that light bulb moment is kind of how I'm hearing it, but I'd love to hear your experience of, I suppose, the context that you were in, feeling kind of, in some sense, and apologies for putting words in your mouth, but maybe confused or, unsettled, dissatisfied, and then kind of being introduced to the world of yoga, that offered something. Can you talk about what it was that it offered and that moment?
Yeah, I think it was, so I was living in London and working and doing therapeutic work with kids who'd been sexually abused and were sexually abusing other children. And so it was tough work. And, I was young and I probably drank too much alcohol and, would often find myself, buying a bottle of wine to drink with my friends on my way home to my, flat in London. And so I started going to a yoga class, and I came out of the yoga class and I had to adjust my mirror. Like, I was taller. I felt like I'd been to the gym in the way that, that sort of energetic movement through the body. And I had hated the gym, like I wasn't very I wasn't a gym goer, but sometimes I went because I knew it was good for me. And, and it was this sort of non-competitive thing. So that was the other thing that I didn't really love about sport, was like, I loved to play and I loved the teamwork, but I didn't really jive with the competitive nature of it. That made me feel sort of stressed, I think. And I'd come from a family where we had some competitive sports people in our family, and I just felt like I'd never measured up. So, being able to be really fully present to my body, to my breath, to the movement, and, feel a certain level of accomplishment, but more this sort of sense of, I can feel better, and, I don't feel like I need to stop and get some wine on the way home. Actually, I just want to go home and, share this with my flatmates and help them to like do some yoga too, which I did. And that's really how I started teaching yoga too. I was working in a job where I didn't I had to take an hour off for lunch and didn't have anything to do. I was in the middle of the suburbs in London and like not even any shops around me. So I started doing my own practice at lunchtime, and all of my colleagues went, "Oh, can you teach us? Can you teach us?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm just doing something." And then I realized that teaching was a different thing than doing it. And so my yoga teacher at the time suggested I do a teacher training. And I realized it was quite a different thing to instruct other people's bodies and in the process. But that the ability, and in those days, there wasn't yoga classes on every corner, and there wasn't, so this is like 1992, and there wasn't certainly anything online. There wasn't an online. so I was doing my own practice, and that was very much part of like taking up yoga in those days, was that you were expected that you would come to class for, inspiration and learning, but that you would be maintaining your own practice if you were going to be a serious student. So I pretty much did that from the beginning, and soon started like practicing with others, and then teaching others. Yeah.
So you somewhat found the value in it, and then kind of immersed yourself. That first time, you almost described it as though you're kind of like connecting with your body, connecting with feeling, sensations, a perspective that you hadn't probably felt for some time, or potentially maybe even ever.
Yeah. Well, and particularly connected with it in a way where I didn't have an agenda on it. So I guess, to play sport, to some extent, you have to pay attention to what the body's doing to develop skill. But when you have that sort of agenda that it needs to perform in a particular way, then, then there's something that takes out of just being present to it. And, with yoga, it is that there are postures and there is alignment to pay attention to, but it's really, and this took me a little while, I have to say, that I was probably competitive with myself, at least in my yoga practice, which, it took a little while to learn not to do that. But the essence of the practice really is to help open up the body, to clear in yoga we would say to clear the nadis, or the energy channel, so that the prana or the life force can flow through you. And, the constrictions arise because we have like tightness that we hold. And the tightness that we hold, it is there is a sort of physical patterning on that, but often there's a emotional, psychological patterning about why we hold in a particular way. That, we will have had stress in some level or other, and then when we're stressed, and, we know this when we do our practices, that like even a thought can like bring a particular sort of tension in a particular way to the body. And over time, those patterns sometimes just dig themselves deeper and deeper in, and then, that results in us looking a particular way in our bodies, that we show up in the world because we've patterned ourselves in a particular way, particularly around stress. So, yoga, the sort of postures are designed to like find all of those things. One of my favorite yoga teachers, Bill Wood, he would say, we're all like badly erected tents. We're all loose and floppy in some places and we're tied in other places. And yoga is designed to find those things. That's why, the postures, the asanas are, difficult, and we'll find some difficulty in doing them because either we have not got a strength where we could have, or we're holding on where we could release. And so when you find the yoga postures that are like difficult for your body, this is good because it's showing something. So it's not about that you have to achieve a particular posture, but that it will show you where you can open, or where you can release, or where you can strengthen.
Wow, that's really fascinating. I've never heard yoga explained that way, in this sort of attentive way of going through these postures, exploring what's there. And when you find a tight or loose spot that is different than, I suppose, that sort of nicely erected tent, so to speak, you then place your attention to that and kind of just explore it to see, kind of where's it coming from, or is this something I'm bringing into my practice? Am I trying too hard? Is it that I got stressed at work and I'm walking in, in an aggravated or irritated way? I've never kind of thought of it almost as like a thought being embedded in a part of my body.
Yeah, I mean, I can remember once, attempting to do like the forearm balance, and having a teacher try and show me, and looking at technique, and you can get really sort of technical and like engineer-like about how to do postures, and which muscles you want to anchor and which muscles you want to open, and like this. And so I'm getting him to have a look at my forearm balance, and then he concludes it's just about fear. Like that's the only thing that's stopping me from doing the forearm balance. I go, oh, okay. And then when I realize it's just, a fear of like going up and falling on my head, that technically I'm going okay, that actually gave me some confidence to go have another go and go up into the posture.
So really, when someone is describing, I'm going, to do a yoga session, in some sense they're doing mindfulness practice throughout, in terms of the intent, depending on their intent. Is there's this kind of non-judgmental exploration or observation of the body, postures, and when we notice something, we can then go out and become more curious, examine it, and kind of we might need to kind of let it kind of relax a little bit more, or let it go a little bit more, allow things to sort of pass through more, or we might be kind of hesitating to push a bit further, or whatever it might be, and we're kind of curiously examining. Am I kind of somewhat there?
Yeah. And you could say like curiously exploring the edges. So I wouldn't say that there's ever like a need to push, and there's and there is like still exploration of the edge.
Isn't that so nice? Instead of push, it's an exploration of the edge, because there's such different things, right? One's very much sort of struggle related, and one's still very much open-handed, gentle, holding of a position. Once again, the intent, is so important to notice. That's my novice exploration, because I don't do yoga. So
yeah. And often people feel like that they do need to, and that's what I said. It takes time to know, like, not to push. It takes time to like learn, and even to know what pushing feels like in the body. Like that actually can be an inquiry in and of itself. Like, when is it push, and when is it, inquiry and opening and curiosity, and it's different. Like it's like when you come back to an intention to notice your motivation, then you'll find out find that out. Like I'm just as I'm aware of that doesn't mean I'm immune to it. Like I can still get on my yoga mat going, oh, I just need to get rid of this shoulder. But like if I start my practice and go with that intent, and particularly if it's unexamined, the quality of my practice will be quite different than if I go, oh, I've got something going on in my shoulder and I can feel this desire to want to get rid of it. And yet, could I just like notice that desire to want to get rid of it and explore anyway? And just see, bring back that, I think we talked about last time, this sort of beginner's mind where maybe I don't know, even though like I've done, I kind of probably millions of down dogs, maybe that's not, at least thousands, hundreds of thousands of down dogs. Could I come to that down dog, fresh and in inquiring like right here and now about, where I can allow breath to move through the body, allow an opening or allow a strengthening or whatever it is that's going on. So when you look at, I don't know, me practice or somebody else practice like this, it's like there will be a way that you sort of go to the edge of your, what the posture can offer you in that moment. And then you sort of wiggle around in it, for want of a better word, like that you find a way to, because, the body needs to move with breath anyway. So like the way that you are in a full in breath versus the way that you are when your breath is out of the body is quite different. And so different things are possible. And in breath will always bring some degree of tension to the body, and out breath will always bring some degree of relaxation to the body. So, in holding a structure of a posture, you get that opportunity to explore with the breath. So often it is useful to come like a little bit off your edge on in breath and then use the out breath to explore the edge, so that you can, and also the out breath because it helps us relax into like an opening or wherever you are heading in a posture.
It's so elegant and beautiful how you describe it. I can imagine the beginner's mind for me being a competitive person. I'd be kind of trying to master the pose and clearly not doing the practice that would be beneficial, because that would be all built with judgment and, whether I'm striking the pose well enough, and then I'd be going out and saying, gosh, I'm really unfit because it's hurting, and, why couldn't I, hold that the way I would like, or I can't stretch far enough, I need to go and push harder and, stretch more, and then I'll be a better student, and all this sort of nonsense in comparison to this really elegant, grounded, curious, reflective practice, even in the way that you describe, kind of being in the pose and then watching the breath coming in and out, and seeing how that changes the posture, or where it's tighter or where it's got gentler, or gives some level of relief.
But I guess
it could look kind of the same on the outside, but the intent could be vastly different on the inside, where one could feel quite frustrated versus another could feel in tune and quite settled from the practice.
Yeah, and as a teacher, you might be able to see the difference between striving and, settling in and opening with curiosity in your students, for sure. But I would say, like even when you discover you're striving, that doesn't have to be something apart from your practice. Then you can go, like mindfulness, it's like you discover something that's judgmental when you're aiming for non-judgmental, and then you can go, oh, there's the judgment. How interesting. So there's always layers out that you can go with your awareness. And if your awareness is clear, then, it's okay. Even though, the striving may not be what's wanted, noticing the striving is still practicing.
Yeah. I know when I did a 10 or 12 day Vipassana sort of practice some time ago now, I remember one of the monks there that was leading the practice talking about having practiced for 10 years, and being the most diligent and hardworking student, kind of at the end of those 10 years, it dawned on him, or he had that reflective moment where he in some sense, realised that he wasn't practicing what he was, in some sense, wanting to, or there was that shift. But he so wisely then also filled in the description around that moment, in that he needed 10 years of sitting and keeping the pillow warm, as they would talk about it. Just keep the pillow warm, because it all adds to, I suppose, that moment of awareness, and for him, it took those 10 years. For another, it might be 15, or for someone else, it might be 7, or might be weeks. No one ever knows, but they were all still fruitful hours. It's not about actually getting it right. The fact that insight occurred is what this is about. It just reminded me when you were saying that.
Yeah, and like insight, to a certain extent, we think of it as something mystical or magical, but like insight is something that we can practice, and so a practice is always awareness. So, that's how insights arise, because we continue to practice, being aware, and that's the beauty of being able to sit in a silent meditation retreat, is that the awareness can gather more, more muscle, in that it can be aware of more and more subtle things, because there are less things going on, externally, and then, eventually the mind also settles down and there's less things going on internally. So, to keep honing, if you like, the awareness as the point of practice, no matter whatever your achievements or previous insights are. For me, that's been a huge learning, because, insights arise, and it's like a sort of celebration. It's like, oh, I've seen something that I haven't seen before. How wonderful. And, it's easy to, in those moments, go, I've got it now, and now I've got it. And the moment that you go, now I've got it, the curiosity shuts down and the arrogance builds up. And that's the moment that it gets lost. So, humbling as it is, that's why I continue to practice, because otherwise it's just, there's, some sense of identification around the insight is the, seems a problem. So all I can do is continue to practice.
Hence why when I was introducing you and I used the word expert, there was awkwardness on your face going, no, maybe not quite. That's it's almost like this position of forever novice, forever learning, to keep keeping, how does sort of formal practice then show up in other areas of life? So if I come to yoga and practice this level of intent and awareness, being mindful of my body, of my breath, of the different aspects of the physiology and the mind, what thoughts I'm having and the like, what are some of the things I can expect come from that outside of practice? What would you say?
Well, I guess that it's important to have a sense of an intent to I don't know, I think not really have separation. Most of my insights have arisen not on the cushion, so to speak. So, and I think sometimes we can get into that, like, now I'm practicing, now I'm having the rest of my life. As my Roshi said, it really doesn't matter what happens on the cushion, because practice is, why it's called practice is because it's for life. It only matters really what happens, when the rubber meets the road of your life. How do you show up in your relationships? How do you, meet the moment particularly those tricky moments? Can you be there, with presence, with kindness, or with whatever qualities that you're aiming to cultivate? And so you cultivate them on the mat because it's like that's the easy part because you've got sort of controlled conditions, if you like. So the controlled conditions that you might have on a retreat, offer you the opportunity to see more clearly. And so when you have the sort of chaotic conditions of life and, out on the busy street in the city, in your family, in your, relationships, in your work, whatever, then you have the uncontrolled environment. And so that's when you want to have the skills to show up in a way that, that you have determined, so that there's some level of, agency in how you act in the world. So not quite your question there, but what can we expect from...
But it makes sense. There's no delineation between practice and life because the common thread through that, what I'm hearing is being present, being aware, being mindful. And so if I'm in a room with nowhere to be other than I'm practicing yoga, that's easy because it's a controlled condition. But as I walk out, I am still having honed that practice. I'm a little bit better at noticing, and so I might kind of notice myself getting agitated, driving away from yoga because now I'm in traffic, getting frustrated at the time it's taking, and so I can kind of notice what's my posture even in the car, or be able to kind of explore that gentler rather than getting caught up in the world. Am I kind of capturing?
Yeah, totally. And I think, when we first come to practice, I think I said, we have the advantage of the beginner's mind, that we have the curiosity and the openness to just look, which is a skill that we want to cultivate throughout life, throughout practice. And yet also at the beginning of practice, as some calm starts to come to us, then we also have this sort of risk of saying, oh, look, I could get really calm in the yoga class or in the meditation, and now I'm out in the dusty streets, and, which is totally what happened to me. I started to notice how frustrated I was at traffic, and it was like immediately then this sort of judgment on my, frustration in the traffic. I'm like studying to be a yoga teacher. I shouldn't be frustrated at traffic. So frustration takes on that sort of, the negative connotations, gets the judgment, and that judgment, initially not seen, brings further suffering. So, it can be really tricky in the beginning because it looks like we're cultivating it, and it'll be, something like this. Here's my calm. I'm going to let it be, become so big, and here's my sort of frustration, my agitation, and I'll just eventually get so much calm that I'll, knock that agitation, that irritation and frustration for a six. But, it's not the nature of calm to do this. It's not the nature of calm to, have a go at anything, including all of the mind states that arise. So, if it's the nature of calm, yes, you develop it and cultivate it, but not for its own sake, so that it can come in and be something more of a, that it can help with the awareness to get around this, so that this can arise and it can pass away, because that's the nature of things. As part of the insights that you develop is that everything arises and everything passes away, including our moods and our mind states. And, if agitation and irritation and frustration can arise and pass away before I've said anything terrible to my friends, then that's a good thing.
Yeah, because I can.
If I used to be shouting it.
Sorry, my apologies.
Oh, I just saying, if I was someone who maybe shouted at my friends or my family or something, and now I can watch my irritation arise and pass away as an internal event, and I haven't shouted at my friends or my family, then, this is progress and it's good. And so we want to still have that ability to welcome all of that, particularly what shows up internally, because we don't have as much control over that as we'd like to think we have. We have control much more in, comes out of our mouth, where we put ourselves in the world, what we say and do. And, to some extent, the on the cushion work and the the work in life isn't separate. And even when you look at the Satipatthana Sutta, which is the four foundations of mindfulness in the Pali canon, the work of the Buddha, that the last foundation is the foundation of the Dhammas, which really translates to phenomena and everything. So, you set your foundation in the body and breath, you start to cultivate the awareness of pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral, and also then your awareness in the mind states and the moods and the emotions. And then, when you sort of, although it's not linear like that, when you've got a certain level of practice, then the foundation of, looking at all things that arise. And there's, of course, lists and ways to help categorize and delineate what it is that you might look for when you're looking at all of phenomena. But so that would imply practice in life.
I imagine that in essence, most of the practice does occur in life rather than, on the mat or on the cushion.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I can see for myself, obviously, holding the role of psychologist in my work, I'm so often exposed to people's experiences and normalizing them. That the feelings, the thoughts are of a normal nature. They might be unwanted. Having said that, they're still within the realm of what we can expect. And I know that being aware of that, in some sense, is this ongoing cultivation of being non-judgmental even with myself, so I can kind of begin to be a little bit more compassionate or self-compassionate, so that when I have a judgment of, I'm not exercising or something, I can actually be okay with that and say, well, I actually don't have to, and I can give myself permission not to. That doesn't mean that I don't see benefits in doing so, or can be encouraging in trying to be more active, but it's not with a stick. It's more with like an open hand and saying, yeah, maybe let's go for a walk, or something like that. I think that the word cultivation comes to mind quite powerfully in the way that it's practiced. It's not I've done X amount of hours. It's I am continually present, working on it. Being conscious of the values that come from it.
Yeah, and I think like Kevin Polk's work on the matrix and delineating our motivation in terms of whether it's away from something we don't want or towards something that we are wanting to cultivate, and I think it speaks to that to that looking at, like, if we're motivating ourselves for anything, like whether it's exercise or yoga or meditation, from that, like, I've got to get out of the difficult feeling, or I've got to get away from, this sense of being unfit, or if we're trying to run away from something, we'll inevitably, running, fighting, hiding, freezing, shutting down, we'll activate that sort of threat response. And so even if we do manage to get ourselves out the door, it's sort of in that robotic, I have to do this, and we start to create like a rigid and narrow world for ourselves. So
it goes back to intent,
yeah.
Why am I on the mat? Am I trying to go out and master this pose, or am I being curious and gentle and exploring the edges? And there's a very different world between the competitive side versus one that is more of a connection side with the here, the now, the present, and what we can even be appreciative of or grateful for.
Yeah, and that exploring the edge, like in a yoga pose, we can also, I guess, translate for ourselves when we might be wanting to do difficult things in our lives, like have vulnerable conversations in our relationships, because we know that vulnerability is the thing that connects us to people, and yet, and being open, being like revealing of ourselves, being, of our feelings, can be the way that connects us to others. And yet we can really avoid that, so that, there might be a difficult conversation to have in a relationship. And if we're in that place of constantly like avoiding that which is difficult, or, pushing into that. So, in that way, what happens on the yoga mat can really help us to like know how to approach with like, okay, so we stay at the edge and we stay willing to explore, and we stay willing to speak about, what seems difficult to speak about, in the same way that we might stay with approaching, a yoga asana that feels like it's like impossible.
Something that just came to mind while you spoke about that is, I find it awfully difficult to say sorry. That's not my my strength, and as you can imagine, there are times when it would be useful for me to be able to say sorry. But talking about the sitting in the edge, I've almost gone out and cultivated this capacity to go out and say, look, I'm sorry, and I might go out and even name the behaviour that I'm sorry about.
Beautiful.
But it's almost like that's as far as the edge goes. It's kind of like I've developed that pose, and I'm not taking it any further. I'm not wiggling. I'm not kind of exploring. Is there more to it? And it's just dawned on me in what you were saying, how limited my range is. I've only found a little part of the range, and there's maybe a whole lot more possibilities of, when I do say sorry. Well, first of all, to be able to say sorry, maybe even more frequently, and to acknowledge that, but also in how I say sorry, or what I say sorry about, or why am I sorry? Who am I sorry to? What are what's the wider picture? How do I feel myself when I'm saying sorry? Naming maybe where it shows up, because it's often sort of this tightness in my chest, in my throat. I often get a headache. It's almost like it's a stressful sort of thing. Like I'm just doing it now in some sense. I'm just naming it all. There's this powerful way of exploring the edges. That's really, really fascinating, Nelly. I've never thought of it in that way. It just triggered that in me.
Great, that's beautiful. Thank you, Nesh. And just hearing you speak about the sorry as well, it's just how to broaden out like what's possible in the sorry, because I think that that can really be like a way that helps us connect to people more fully. Like when there's a sorry and it's like a full, like, I'm sorry for a particular behavior, and this is wrong of me because, and I think that the asking for forgiveness is often one of those sort of key things, because it seems to me anyway, the thing that shows up around the difficulty is, what if I've like ruined things? What if they don't like me? And so, being able to ask for forgiveness.
Well, you become scared, right? If I acknowledge I've done something wrong, they have reason now to not be friends with me or leave me or whatever it might be. Will they actually forgive? Or now that I've acknowledged it, does that now give them right to, say goodbye? It's frightening.
Yeah, totally. But, but on some level, if you don't do that, then, then you have the stress of wondering whether they would. And, and then it becomes, it's in that realm of what's unspoken in relationship. And, like it becomes a tension that you have to hold. Well, if they knew this about me, they probably wouldn't forgive me. And, and sometimes I find people hold that for years, and I go,
resentment can build, right? I mean, the not going out and acknowledging any of your contributions, someone else, maybe namely my wife, might go out and say, "Listen, buddy, I'm not happy with your lack of contribution to what's occurred, and it's getting a little bit thin, right? My wife's probably going to become really good friends with you after this.
So it sounds like you're already progressed in that, like, you're already making the apologies and being clear about the behavior, and, if you indicate like why it's wrong, and if you ask for the apology, then,
Sorry, baby, if you're listening. But it's fascinating, that the exploring of the edges. I've never thought of yoga and mindfulness in this way. The practical application is so much richer than what I've ever realised. That real sense of curiosity and ongoing curiosity.
Something we get, even if we achieve a posture, it's like, that's just a little like momentary fruit, that you can feel good about. But it's just like a momentary, glorious moment in a relationship, like you go out and you have a wonderful time and you go, you look at each other in the eye and go, I'm so glad we're together. And, that's a moment, but it doesn't mean that you let go of all of the work that you do to, continue to cultivate having those moments and, and being your best with each other and supporting each other and whatever else you're in relationship for. It just means you've had a beautiful moment. So it's a bit the same thing. I think I remember I didn't actually ever manage to do a handstand unassisted until I was like 45. And I was like, oh, yay, and I did it on my 45th birthday. So there was like, an achievement. Like, I can do a handstand now. But, and that's lovely. It was fantastic to celebrate it. But, and, I've already been doing yoga for nearly 20 years at that point in time. And it's like, I don't know how I never got to do a handstand. But anyway, that's irrespective of the thing. The point of the story was that, that wasn't the end of my practice, or and I didn't stop, working on my handstand to some extent either. It's just like, that's still an ongoing inquiry.
It's dawned on me on that everyday application. I know that especially as psychologists, we talk about these mindfulness practices or, these exercises of, tasting a sultana or something like that, and looking at all the elements and how rich that can be. But it's actually somewhat of a reminder, this conversation's been, in regards to there's almost like only a small percentage of life that I'm actually experiencing if I'm reflecting. Like when I had a cup of tea before coming in to chat with you, and I don't think I actually enjoyed the cup of tea. I drank it, but I wasn't with it. I didn't kind of appreciate it. I didn't go out and look at the flavours or the colour of it. I remember going, oh, it's a big mug. I'm happy about the big mug. But that was kind of it. And that's very, very different than late at night if my wife goes out and makes me a cup of tea, where I kind of go, and then you kind of go, oh, that's really nice. That's hitting the spot, and those flavours, and it's warm, and there's probably so much. And I'm not necessarily saying as a criticism, but just as noticing from what you're saying, there's probably only a small percentage of my awareness that's being activated at the moment, meaning there's so much more to be experienced. That's exciting.
That is exciting, and there always is, because I can't remember the numbers, but it's something like there's 18,000 pieces of sensory information available to us in any one moment. So, we can't really attend to everything. Yes, we can grow our awareness to attend to more, but inevitably we will attend to, threats and interesting things, novelty things. And so, that's why we can drive down the road that without and go, oh, we're here, and not remember the journey. But of course, we were aware enough to not run into anything. but, I guess in terms of the mindfulness, it's like being aware that we're aware. And, the ability that we have to think about stuff that we're not actually doing does afford a lot of, we never want to sort of get mad at our mind for having that capacity to be like in the future or in past reviewing. But it's just like we also want to recognize that the present moment is also where the joy and the vitality and, like as you said, the cup of tea that your wife has made for you. She's watching. She's now forgiving you for that. Anyway, good cup. Anyway, that that I think that those moments where you're really appreciative and you're genuinely grateful and you're able to share that with somebody, that is the gold dust of life. And if we have more of those gold dust moments, that's absolutely wonderful. And and it seems like we also have a life that's relatively complex. So we need to be able to review what we've done, with a degree of honesty and like awareness, and we need to be able to like you and I wouldn't have shown up here together if we hadn't been able to do some level of planning for this, coming together in time and space, not real space, but cyberspace. Then we wouldn't be here having a conversation. So, I guess it's about finding the balance.
And that curiosity also, and that focus, which is a big part of the yoga practice, is being able to shift focus and point it in different areas and be curious that over time we can also shift it to the here and the now and what we're grateful for and what's rich and beautiful and something we can appreciate that maybe wasn't there previously. Maybe life isn't as terrible as it might feel or as painful as it might feel, having also seen this other elements, that there's more elements I can see. And so, if there's 5 sort of harsh, difficult, uncomfortable, things in my life right now, there might also be another 5, 10, 2, 1, 17 things to be appreciative of as well, and so they can coexist rather than just be consumed by one.
Yeah, and like I think what mindfulness practice helps to do is sort of preference the present moment and preference what's beautiful, what we can appreciate, and preference kindness, because our threat response will have us go fight, flight, freeze, shut down, and also have the mind try and figure out how we're never going to be in this terrible situation again, review the past, plan for the future, review the past. So, so because our system will, preference keeping us safe, our practice, we can preference present moment, kindness, gratitude, like this. So that's a way to sort of help the balance out and to know, with awareness when we've gone into that. I think one of my meditation teachers said, so the Buddhist word for like that sort of overthinking, thinking is papancha. So he said, like there is a thing called planning, and you have to do that. And when you do it once. If you're planning the same thing again, then you've gone into some sort of anxiety, worry, stress, and that's like the puncher. That's the sort of thinking. So, like if you're tracking what's going on internally, you'll notice how many times are you going over the same thing versus, you have to do planning. So having efficient systems like diaries and things like that's great for not over planning, but it means you can make mistakes too, which is sometimes what happens. Then if you've learned how to say sorry, then all is good.
But there's a huge distinction between planning and overthinking or ruminations. Is it apancha? Apancha, eh?
Papancha.
Oh, papancha, my apologies, papancha. Huge distinction between the two and where our focus ends up, and obviously functionally how much time we spend in those things, kind of looking at functionality in that space. Wow, I've learnt so much. I've genuinely learned so much, or maybe I've remembered some, but I think I'd say I've learnt some greater insights. Look, I think you're amazing. You're definitely an inspiration. How can people contact you, find out more about you, the things that you go out and do? What are your contacts, and how do we get in touch?
Oh, thank you. Yes, so you can find me on nelimartin.com, so that's NeLi Martin. So that website has things that I do that aren't related to my role as a psychologist, but my role as a supervisor, and I run retreats and dance workshops and classes and yoga and walking retreats in the national park and different things that I offer. And then there's also mindfulness practice, so mindfulness-practice.com. That's what I do as a psychologist, so if you want to come and see me and do that. So I work in Noosa, which is a little bit of ways from everywhere, but it's very close to the beach, and I do also work online.
That's wonderful. If anyone has an opportunity, I think you won't be disappointed. You get a lot of value, NeLi. I think you're amazing in your work, and your practice obviously speaks for itself. I like the idea of this, ongoing learning. In some sense, trying to maintain the beginner's mind. It kind of keeps us, youthful and young and exploring all the time. Really appreciate you coming to the podcast and spending time for a second time, but hopefully we can get you on for a third time at some point.
I'd love that. Thanks, Nesh.
Take care.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.